Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. Over the course of the hour, we'll run through all the business news stories you need to know about from right across the continent. But first, let's start with the run through the markets here for you. Quite a bit of red ink, frankly, showing up right across the board here for you today. So to begin with, the NSE 20, of course, going back to pretty much where it was at the start of the year. At these levels, it's about a tenth or so off the levels it started the year with. The Nigerian markets, though, are of a lot more concern, down to about a two-year low. Low economic growth pretty much weighing on sentiment. The NSE 30 is down about 8% so far in the year. This is a key concern. We'll be exploring why that, of course, is the case later on in the course of the year. Here's what's coming up tonight. Zimbabwe to compensate farmers who lost land through a controversial land distribution program. Uganda is reassuring tourists of their safety after the rescue of a kidnapped American and her guide. And we'll explore what's in and what isn't in South Africa's Fashion Week. Right, then our starting point tonight is Zimbabwe. The country plans to start partial compensation to white farmers who lost their land through land reform as soon as the end of this month. The Southern African nation has set aside over $17 million in its 2019 budget in order to fund this compensation program. Some, however, have argued that this figure may not be enough to address the standoff that goes back 20 plus years. Some 4,000 white farmers in the country were stripped of land during the often violent land reform exercise, which the government defended as necessary in order to correct colonial land injustice. Zimbabwe's Ministries of Finance and Agriculture say the registration process and the list of farmers ought to be completed by the end of this month, after which the interim advance payments will be paid directly to the former farm owners. All right, then, so let's get you the latest on what this program entails. CGTN's Farai Mokhtar has been following this story. He joins us now from the Zimbabwe capital of Harare. Farai, $17.5 million, as I mentioned, set aside for this compensation program. But how will this capital be deployed?
Well, Ramah, indeed, 17.5, as you say. The actual figure will obviously run into billions of dollars. This is an interim payment. Zimbabwe keen to start this process of compensation, and so they've budgeted this amount as an initial payment that they will start to disperse to these farmers once they've been identified. Now, what we do understand is that some of the former farmers who are in financial distress will be the first to receive these initial payments. You'll appreciate that these farmers, some of them have been off their land for close to 2 decades now, and that is the only livelihood that many of them had. And if they failed to find any gainful employment or some sort of income, many of them have indeed fallen on hard times. And so those will be the recipients, the initial recipients, the first category of recipients of farmers who will receive these interim payments. Going forward, as government is able to get more resources, it will then make additional payments. But as you say, there is a process to identify those farmers, to quantify the amount of money that should be paid out in compensation. It should be completed by end of this month, and then the disbursements will begin.
Right, so the state says it's only going to pay for infrastructure improvements done on farms, but not for the land itself. So what informs that approach?
Well, Ramah, the position of Zimbabwe has been very clear from the beginning, and that is that the land, the ground, the soil, this land belongs to Zimbabwe, that it was illegally taken from locals by the colonialists when they came into the country, and so it belongs to the state, it belongs to the country. And in fact, even now, after the land reform, all land still belongs to the state. Farmers who are on it, resettled farmers, are given leases to farm on that land, but it all belongs to the state. And so based upon that, Zimbabwe is saying, we can't pay you for something that belongs to us. We'll pay you for improvements that were made, farmhouses, barns, dams, irrigation infrastructure, amongst others. Those are the things that the government is willing to pay for. But the land which does belong to Zimbabwe, they say was taken illegally, it won't be compensated.
Indeed, so this land redistribution program, obviously a deeply divisive issue decades after it was implemented. But given the country's current economic context, its current economic crisis, how is this plan being received by ordinary citizens?
Well, there are mixed reactions, Ramah. I think on one end of the spectrum, you've got people who are saying, look, let's start this process because clearly it is a hindrance. It is a stumbling block to normalization of relations with Britain in particular and the rest of the Western world. And so if we are to make make this gesture, to begin this process, then certainly that will hopefully unlock some of the doors that have been shut on Zimbabwe and hopefully accelerate the reintegration program. It is an obligation that Zimbabwe must meet, and so it must be done. But on the other end of the spectrum, as you say, the economic situation at this point in time, some people saying, look, this may not be priority at this point in time, that 17.5 million might be better, might do better if we put it into the health sector, if we buy medicines and drugs and things like that, or if we put it elsewhere. So it is a very divisive topic, as you quite rightly say, but I think in many respects the government is keen to start this process, to get it underway, because it has an obligation to meet. The sooner it gets it done, the better. It has budgeted funds for it, and hopefully it can get some help along the way from some international finances, maybe international development partners, to speed up these payments and hopefully, re-engage, rebuild those relations, restore those bridges of relationship with Britain and the rest of the world, and indeed help it get out of the economic mess that it's in at this point in time.
Indeed. We'll leave it there for the time being. For Ramah Nyang, live, of course, in Harare. Thank you very much. Now, the Ugandan President, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, says his country is safe for travellers. This comes in the wake of the kidnapping of a US tourist and her guide, but they were rescued unharmed on Sunday. A ransom was reportedly paid for their release 6 days after they were abducted by gunmen while on an evening game drive in a Queen Elizabeth National Park. The president, however, took to Twitter, where he vowed to further strengthen security in national parks. Tourism, of course, is a key, vital industry for Uganda. It's home to rare mountain gorillas and other abundant wildlife, and a massive Lake Victoria as well, not to mention the snow-capped Rwenzori Mountains.
You're all aware the victim who had been held captive together with her safari guide, Jean Paul Mirenge, were released because, first of all, of the implicit threat of the use of force after the armed captors knew they were being hotly pursued by the joint team of security agencies. And at this stage, I would like to inform you that the operation is still ongoing with the help of our counterparts from the DRC. There are many armed groups along that area, and from the foregoing, we have certain leads which could be indicating that there could be a network, even locally within Uganda, based on the information that we do have. That is a lead that is being following, that they could have been working with some elements within.
Let's focus on Tanzania now. It plans to ban the production, import, sale and use of all single-use plastic bags by July. Now, the move is meant to help deal with pollution from non-biodegradable waste sources. The East African nation is the latest country to make a formal commitment to phase out single-use, non-biodegradable plastics, which have been identified by the UN as one of the world's biggest single environmental challenges. According to UN estimates, of the 9 billion tons of plastic the world produces, only 9% is being recycled. Tanzania will now join more than 60 other countries that have either banned or partially banned or taxed single-use plastic bags, including China, France, Kenya, Rwanda and Italy. Over in South Africa, a court has ruled that Mozambique's former finance minister, Manuel Chang, can be extradited to the United States. He has been held since December on a US warrant over corruption allegations. Chang was arrested at Johannesburg's main airport, OR Tambo, on the 29th of December over alleged involvement in $2 billion worth of fraudulent loans to Mozambican state firms. The magistrate, William Shooter, ruled that there is evidence that Manuel Chang has committed the crimes he's charged with and that all conditions are met so that he can be tried in the United States. Mozambique, as well, also wants to try him at home. Into the world of aviation now. In spite of the shock of the tragic accident in March this year, Africa's largest carrier, Ethiopian Airlines, has announced plans to expand its current 5 destinations in China to now more than 8. The new destinations are planned to cut travel time and expenses for quite a few travellers. Here's CGTN's Kirumchala with the details.
Africa's largest airliner, Ethiopian, flies to 5 Chinese destinations daily, from Addis Ababa Bole International Airport to Chinese cities of Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Hong Kong, as well as Chengdu. ET now wants to make few more additions for both passenger and cargo services to China.
Now we are also discussing to add Shenzhen, and we are going to sign a memorandum of understanding on Chongqing as a cargo destination, and Zhengzhou, another cargo destination. We are also discussing to add cargo flights to Pudong. So, you know, when you combine both passenger and cargo, we have 54 flights a week to China. And this is the largest in our network, per country network.
About 70 years back, Ethiopian Airlines was the only carrier which flew from Africa to China. It connected Africa with Beijing. Today, Ethiopian Airlines claims a large contribution towards developing the strong ties between Africa and China.
China is a very big investor in China, in Africa. So we are also the largest carrier between China and Africa. And our market share is more than 50%. So we are larger than Emirates or than any other carrier in terms of the trade lane between China and Africa.
China itself is at the heart of Ethiopian Airlines' fast expansion and success.
On this side, CCCC is building the terminal and the ramp expansion. It's $350 million project, and as you can see, the cranes are up and running and at a fast speed. Avic has also built this hotel, and Avic has built a maintenance hangar. So everything here, as you can see, is Chinese.
Ethiopian Airlines, a government-owned national flag carrier, is still building bridges between China and Ethiopia, as well as other African states. Ethiopia and China have the highest comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership. Therefore, its success in the Chinese market is one good example that the partnership is working pretty well. Grumtala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
All right, then a quick run through some corporate headlines. Let's start in the telco world. MTN's 10-year operating license in Uganda is being called into question. This comes after the network regulator charged the telecommunications company $118 million compared to the $100 million proposed by the Ugandan cabinet for its license. Now, MTN struggled to renew its license started after the country's president, Yoweri Museveni, criticized the country's communications commission for offering the operator a 10-year license for about $58 million. Elsewhere, demand for Saudi Aramco's first international bond is expected to exceed $30 billion. That's according to Saudi Energy Minister Khalid Al-Falih. That would essentially represent an oversubscription rate of more than 3 times for the world's most profitable company, which also plans to have an IPO somewhere in the future. The state-controlled energy giant plans to tap bond markets later this week, marking the first ever debt issuance from the world's largest single oil firm. In the car world, FCA, or Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, has agreed to pay the electric car maker Tesla in order to count the company's electric vehicles as part of its own fleet. Now, the move will essentially allow this European car maker to avoid paying hefty fines if it was to exceed the EU's emissions limit, which dropped to about 95 grams per kilometre next year. And speaking of cars, nascent shareholders have ousted the former chairman, Carlos Ghosn, as a director of the company. Now, that formally cuts his ties with the Japanese car maker, which he rescued from near bankruptcy 2 decades ago, and from which is now accused of siphoning funds. Shareholders had gathered for an extraordinary general meeting just days after Ghosn's latest arrest in Tokyo. Ghosn, for the record, has denied all charges against him. He says he's a victim of a boardroom coup. That's a run through your company headlines. We are 15 minutes into the hour. You're watching Global Business Africa. We're back in 30 minutes after this.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sue. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business. Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, as far as funds raised is concerned, 2018 was a pretty positive year for private equity across Africa, and for a couple of reasons. According to the industry group AVCA, $2.7 billion was raised for investment across the continent in 2018. That's 11% more than the year before. 2018's number is also important because it snapped a multi-year decline that started in 2016. The year before that, $4.5 billion was raised for investment by PE firms right across the continent. However, the total value of deals done in the continent last year did fall by 10.25% to about $3.5 billion. Tech is a fast-growing investment segment. It's getting a lot of attention. But between 2013 and 2018, most of the money raised by private equity firms was actually spent in a completely different sector: utilities, communication services, and energy as well. Now, Michelle Catherine Isome is the CEO of the Africa Private Equity and Venture Capital Association. When we spoke earlier today, I started by asking her why private equity funds are wary of investing in boring, if you will, traditional infrastructure like roads and ports.
You'll see a lot of infrastructure deals in renewables, alternative energy sources. And I think that we probably leave roads and ports to, so DFIs like African Finance Corporation or Africa 50, that's part of the African Development Bank. Because if you think about the private equity industry, it's really focused on the private sector. We want to be able to kind of execute in the way that you would in any other emerging market. So you'll see a lot of infrastructure deals that can be related to renewables and power.
There was something else also cropped up, an interesting perception gap, if I may call it that, because 33% of non-African LPs see the continent as being a lot more attractive over the next 10 years. But you compare that to 75% of LPs who are based within Africa. So it does seem that from an outsider perspective, a lot of fund managers look at Africa and say, well, I'm not really sure about whether or not I should put my money into the continent, despite the vast opportunity available.
So the survey is among institutional investors, and it shows the sort of work we need to do with what I call our friends and family. So African pension funds, African foundations, who really should be investing in the asset class in a first instance. And they're starting to. We're seeing in Nigeria, a lot of the Nigerian PFAs have the legal and regulatory authority to invest in private equity, and they've made commitments, and that's very good. Within Kenya, we've been training pension funds in Kenya for a number of years, and subsequently a number of them have made their first commitments to private equity. In Namibia, GIPF, in South Africa, even a few years ago, PIC made their first commitment to a private equity equity fund that was non-South Africa, but they invested in a number of, prior to that, a number of South African private equity funds. So it's really incumbent on sort of all of us to do work with the African pension funds around education, understanding the asset class, because they tend to allocate to government equities, government bonds within their, within their country. And I can understand, an alternative asset class is very different than a listed one. Sort of understanding what the J-curve means in private equity, any potential headline risk. So I think it will come. It's a complement to a portfolio that's in just domestic bonds or domestic equity, to have some alternatives to sort of, give your portfolio a boost and diversification.
In order of attractiveness, Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, Cote d'Ivoire and South Africa, Morocco, Ethiopia and Ghana. These are the countries that apparently your LP say they're really interested in. But I'm curious about the Nigeria case. Yes, it's got Africa's biggest single population in one country, but growth there has been relatively stagnant for quite a while. So what's the attractiveness in Nigeria?
Well, one wise person said, not me, that we don't invest in GDP. So the Nigeria market is very exciting. So you have a wealth of private equity fund managers. You have many entrepreneurs with fantastic ideas. Lydia Bank, Paga, for example, there are a number of them. So it's sort of like a market on the continent that cannot be missed. So you have Nigeria, you have Kenya and South Africa. And, although growth could slow, although, whatever that could be happening politically, it's still a market that, if you're a Pan-African investor, you want to find an opportunity, you want to find a local partner and be there.
And speaking of Nigeria, the IMF has expressed renewed confidence in the country's economy, even as it welcomes the ongoing recovery. The financier, however, is calling on the West African nation to remove its controversial fuel subsidies, which cost billions of dollars every single year. CGTN's Deji now reports.
It's actually not the first time the IMF is asking Nigeria to remove its controversial petrol subsidy, but on each and every occasion, the government has refused to budge.
I think the removal of fuel subsidy has been long overdue. For several years, way back 10, 15, 20 years, it was obvious that we needed to remove the subsidy.
With due respect to IMF, Nigerians require subsidy. We require subsidy in health, we require subsidy in education, we require subsidy in transportation, we require subsidy in energy.
Petrol subsidy is arguably the most controversial topic in Nigeria. No government in the country has been able to remove it. A bid to do away with the subsidy in 2012 led to a nationwide protest that lasted for days until the government at the time was forced to back down.
It is never too late to do the right thing. So, and it's nothing to do with whether IMF says so or not. It is the logic is self-justifying, is self-evident to us that we need to remove the subsidies.
If this thing is removed, it will grind Nigerian economy to a halt. If you try increasing the price of petrol, people, even criminals in Sambisa forest will feel the heat. That is the extent to which that thing affects and will permeate through the strata of Nigerian economy and cause us heat and pain.
The removal of petrol subsidy is a delicate banana peel no government in this country wants to step on. Even the current government actually broached the idea when it first came to power in 2015, but had to abandon it altogether, fearing a possible political backlash from the people.
Failure to remove the subsidy is the primary reason why we haven't seen a lot of refineries being built in Nigeria. So the people do not enjoy the benefit of the subsidy. The jobs that are to be created by new refineries are not being built.
The fact that subsidy has been mismanaged or abused in Nigeria, does not discount it or discountenance it from being a universally economic cushioning concept.
With all its 4 publicly owned refineries almost comatose, Nigeria imports an average of 91% of its daily consumption of refined petrol and spends billions of dollars subsidizing the price at which it is sold. The government currently pegs the price of a litre of petrol at about 40 US cents, the lowest among the country's neighbors, thereby creating an incentive for smuggling of subsidized petrol across its borders. The government has so far not responded to the call by the IMF. It's already earmarked around $1 billion in this year's budget for petrol subsidy payment. So that may just be a clear sign that it may not yet be ready to turn off the tap on petrol subsidy. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Tunisian and Arab authorities are working to boost partnership on BDS, a navigation satellite system independently developed by China. It's basically the equivalent of GPS. Now, the global service started last year. It's said to have a positive impact on several economic sectors in the region. CGTN's Adin Chachi has all the details.
The Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research in Tunisia announced that China and Arab countries aim to deepen cooperation on wider application of China's Beidou navigation satellite system BDS in the Middle East.
This is a strategic partnership between Tunisia, the Arab world and China. We will boost China and Arab cooperation on the application of satellite navigation technology, which has been widely used in maritime transportation, disaster reduction, land surveying, environmental monitoring, and precision agriculture.
The ambassador for China Arab States Cooperation Forum said that increasing Chinese BDS application in the region will benefit millions of people.
We are proud of the successful cooperation between China and its friends in the Arab world in scientific research and economic sectors. Increasing satellite navigation projects will transform the everyday lives of people.
Representatives from several leading Chinese companies, including China Great Wall Industry Corporation, CASC, and Beijing BDS Star Navigation, which is operating in Algeria, have promoted their products in the Arab region and Africa.
Use this system, you can get the positioning precision from meter level down to centimeter level, even to millimeter level. So this is a really interesting project in Africa.
We are one of the manufacturers of these satellites. Beidou satellite will consist 35 satellites, and it will be fully coverage of the whole world at 2020. So it serves mankind.
According to the Tunisian Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, the establishment of a China Arab State BDS GNNS Center in Tunis in 2018 was an important step in deepening China-Arab cooperation. Tunisian and Chinese officials and scientists have called for jointly building a China-Arab Space Silk Road. Adin Chachi, CGTN, Tunis.
The Industrial Development Authority in Egypt has stopped granting licenses for new tuk-tuk assembly and manufacture plants in the country. This comes as part of the government's efforts to curb the spread of motorcycles and three-wheelers on the streets. The government has also reduced imports of the exact same thing. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with the details.
The tuk-tuk is a popular means of transportation, especially in small neighborhoods and rural areas.
The tuk-tuk is very convenient because it can take you through narrow streets where normal cars or buses cannot go through. It has facilitated life for many people.
It's been especially important for the elderly and women who need transportation to take them to the main roads to the villages or houses inside the neighborhoods. It should be cancelled.
However, the operations of tuk-tuk has been badly managed, creating chaos on Egyptian streets. That's why the government decided to withhold licenses for tuk-tuk.
There are 112 licensed tuk-tuks, but actually over 1 million are roaming the streets. They are cheap to buy, so a lot of them operate without license. Even underage kids drive it. So we are enforcing a license in the vehicle and the driver and putting a limit to their numbers as well as the areas they can operate in. We are legalizing it.
A state study shows 24% of kidnappings have used a tuk-tuk, and over 60% of its drivers are drug users.
The negative effects are clear. There is chaos in the streets. They go to the main roads they are not supposed to be in. The drivers cause lots of accidents and crime because they are not equipped to use it. We don't want to cancel the tuk-tuk. We just want to regulate it so that they have certain routes to stick to and are trained and licensed like any other vehicle.
The government said the new regulations are part of a comprehensive plan to develop the public transportation system in the North African country. There will be new regulations for public buses and taxis expected in 2020. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
It's time for a short break. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up next. Government and the opposition in the UK are still poles apart as a deadline for a no-deal Brexit looms large. And London becomes the first city in the world to penalise drivers for using heavy pollutant vehicles. The details on that coming up shortly.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's recap the stories making you headlines at this hour. Starting in Libya, where gun battles have continued. The death toll so far from renewed fighting is 25. Casualties include combatants and civilians alike. A spokesman for the Tripoli-based government health ministry says 18 more civilians have been wounded so far. Warplanes have also attacked Tripoli's only functioning airport, and that has triggered its closure. Renewed civil wars splintered into areas of factional control after the 2011 overthrow of the country's leader, Muammar Gaddafi. In Sudan, soldiers attempted to chase away pickup trucks, firing tear gas at demonstrators. Sudan's information minister contradicted the report, saying that the security apparatus was working with, in his words, positive energy and harmony. Thousands of protesters are taking part in a sit-in outside army headquarters. They're refusing to leave until President Omar Hassan al-Bashir steps down. The American tourist and driver who were kidnapped at Uganda's Queen Elizabeth National Park have been found unharmed. Kimberly Endicott touched down in Kampala after Ugandan authorities secured her release. And finally, in about 2 weeks, Egypt will be holding a referendum on a series of constitutional changes. The country will be voting on amendments that will grant the military more authority to intervene in the government. Among the changes proposed is to make the armed forces a supervisory body over politics in Egypt. That's a run through your headlines. Right then, let's move on to a story we've been covering in great detail. Brexit. The UK's opposition party, Labour, says that Prime Minister Theresa May has so far failed to convince it to support a divorce deal she spent years negotiating. And remember, this is just 2 days before a European Union emergency summit taking place on the 10th of April, where the Prime Minister will try to delay the UK's departure from the EU yet again. Brexit has already been delayed once, but May is asking the EU for more time as she courts the veteran socialist, Jeremy Corbyn, whose Labour Party wants to keep Britain more closely tied to the EU, even post-Brexit. Nearly 3 years after the UK shocked the world by voting 52 to 48% to leave the EU.
Well, at the moment, we're waiting to see what the government is putting on the table as a proposal. All they've done so far is to indicate various things, but not to change the political declaration. So the ball's in the government's court. We need to see what they come back with. And when we do, we will take a collective position on that.
I think even at this 11th hour, everything has to be done to try and avoid that. But we need to be clear, at some stage this has to come to a conclusion. This cannot go on forever. So it's decision time here. Do you want a deal? Do you want an orderly withdrawal? Do you want an orderly and constructive relationship with all of your European neighbours? And most importantly, from our perspective, understand that whatever way this finishes, the promises made to Ireland must be honoured.
Earlier on, the British Prime Minister defended her decision to seek help from the opposition party. She warned that Brexit might never happen, but you do everything possible to make sure it did.
Now, I think, the government thinks, we absolutely must leave the European Union. We must deliver Brexit. That means we need to get a deal over the line. And that's why we've been looking for new ways, a new approach to find an agreement in Parliament. And that means cross-party talks.
Jaguar Land Rover shutting its UK plant for 5 days due to, you guessed it, Brexit. This adds to yet other shutdowns, leaving at least half the country's car production offline in what could be a key week for Britain's divorce from the European Union. Now, the move by Britain's biggest car maker to prepare for any disruption resulting from Brexit was taken a few months ago at a time when the departure date, since pushed down to the 12th of April, this week Friday, was the 29th of March. Automotive companies face a number of risks under a disorderly Brexit. That includes delays to the supply of parts and finished models, new customs bureaucracy, and the need to recertify their models for sale across the channel, and up to a 10% tariff on finished vehicles. Now, let's stay in the UK. Nothing to do with Brexit this time, though, I promise. Motorists driving into central London face emission penalties depending on how polluting their vehicles are. Now, the ultra-low emission zone charges took effect this week, Monday, and they subject certain vehicles to a $16 fee in order to access the centre of the British capital. Diesel cars, for instance, have to be less than roughly 4 years old in order to avoid the charge. Petrol cars have to be less than 13 years old. All vehicle types, aside from black taxis, are at the moment liable for these charges unless they meet certain emission standards or exemptions. The ultra-low emission zone will be extended to the whole of inner London by October 2021.
There are children in London who have permanent, stunted, underdeveloped lungs because of the poor quality air. Each day, 4 Londoners are hospitalised, one of them are children, because of the bad quality air. Adults have a range of health issues from asthma to heart disease to dementia to cancer, directly attributable to the poor quality air. And it costs the London economy £3.7 billion a year, the national economy £20 billion a year. So we've got a public health crisis. And by the way, it's the poorest Londoners who own the fewest cars who suffer the worst air. And so this policy is part of a package of measures we're taking to try and fix the air in London.
Military navigators and people who use the cell phone's GPS system, you and I basically, we largely rely on the magnetic North Pole in order to orient ourselves. But as the planet's magnetic field lines continue to move constantly, scientists are scrambling to keep up. CGTN's Hendrik Brandy explains.
Brandon Jewett is a commercial pilot who in his spare time flies his Douglas DC-3, a propeller-driven plane that was used to transport troops during World War II.
This is like driving a motorhome.
The cockpit is appropriately retro.
So this is our main instrument panel here, but here's our whiskey compass, front and center, if you will.
Whiskey Compass, named for the alcohol that once lubricated these devices. Navigation has come a long way since the days of American aviator Charles Lindbergh.
Where am I? I could be anywhere from Iceland to the coast of Africa.
Runway 10.
But in this high-tech GPS-driven age, the compass remains an indispensable tool for pilots.
And to this day is one of the original required basic instruments that every single airplane must have.
Most compasses use Earth's magnetic field to tell us which way is north. The problem is the North Magnetic Pole has always had a hard time staying in one place. In fact, it was moving at the rate of 10 to 15 kilometers per year from the Canadian Arctic towards Siberia. Then in the 1990s, it started going 4 times as fast.
I find it spectacular that, the speed increased that much in such a short period of time.
Arno Shulia, a research scientist with the University of Colorado Boulder, says the move was likely caused by the flow of liquid iron deep inside Earth's core.
And these motions generate most of the Earth's magnetic field, and they are also responsible for variability of of this magnetic field.
Gradually, the Siberian Sprint, as it's been called, has made the navigational maps used by airlines and ships out of date.
Where it becomes critical for a pilot is if you were trying to navigate with an old chart, you would have inaccurate information.
In February, scientists released an emergency update to the World Magnetic Model that aids global navigation. And over time, airports have had to rename runways that were named for their magnetic heading.
They've all had to renumber the runways because it's changed that much.
The polar drift has even led to speculation that a weakening magnetic field might lead the north and south magnetic poles to flip spots, which last happened 780,000 years ago. No signs of that just yet.
I don't think there is any reason for particular concern.
Jewett has updated his compass, an instrument pilots won't do without.
There's endless aviation stories of how the compass saved their life. You know, help them find where they were going.
As for where the North Pole is going, it's anyone's guess. Hendrik Sabrandi, CGTN, Denver.
Now, the Chinese have been making tea for thousands of years, but they've not seen it made this way before by Robot in the first self-service milk tea shop in Shanghai. Now, the goal is to make that shop stand out from thousands of others in the city. Chen Tong has that story on What's Hot tonight.
The Robotic milk tea shop is in a mall in downtown Shanghai. And if you don't like the service, there's no one to complain to. Scan the QR code and order the tea on your mobile phone. Bubble tea with just a little ice and no sugar. I'm on a diet. The little orange robot gets busy as soon as you've paid. Press open on your phone and start enjoying your tea.
It takes about 90 seconds to get a milk tea from a robot. You come to everything though. It turns out cream tea and cake tea need some human attention, but it's not bad.
The self-service milk tea shop is an addition to the original tea shop. It opened at the beginning of the month and has boosted sales revenue by almost 10%. The mechanical barista serves about 100 customers each day. Much lighter work than it used to do in its previous factory job. The owner, Happy Lemon, has been around for more than 10 years. And the company CEO admits the robot helper cost her so much that it will take a while to make back the investment. Still, the company hopes the innovation will make it more competitive with the other tea brands in town.
这几年那个奶茶真的非常的火红哦，那大家也都知道，其实有很多很多的。
Milk tea is so popular now, and there are a lot of internet celebrity shops now. We were thinking about how to compete with them. 25 to 30% of our orders are made online, while 70% are offline. Young people want yummy, cheap tea in an interesting atmosphere, and our self-serve shop is really eye-catching.
我们店其实也在吸引年轻人的眼睛。
Like Happy Lemon, other tea brands are also seeing most of their revenue made in offline shops, despite China's rapidly growing food delivery market. A report from research company Mintel shows nearly all consumers in China prefer to buy their tea in physical stores.
I usually drink milk tea during the weekend when I hang out with friends.
I have a lot of free time, and ordering milk tea online doesn't guarantee a good taste.
And that is why many tea brands, especially those that have been around for years, are putting effort into offline innovations. Many like Happy Lemon and Coco have recently changed their logos and redecorated their shops, trying to attract more customers. Even China's oldest milk tea brand Xiangpiaopiao, which became famous for selling instant tea, is now planning to open an offline shop.
The target consumers of milk tea are aged from 25 to 29 years old, and this group like to try new things. They buy milk tea when shopping and dating, so the environment of the offline stores is definitely important to them.
The hot milk tea market stems from Chinese consumers' big appetite. China drank 1.3 billion liters of milk tea last year and paid 50 billion yuan for it. Chen Hong, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Right, then a quick run through commodity news here for you. So let's start with a run through coffee prices. They continue a decline really we've seen from the start of the year. In fact, actually stretches back into 2018. 92.20 is a relevant price. At these levels, it's down 11% so far this year alone. Crude oil also essentially climbing up. This is all Libya risk to a very large extent as far as Brent is concerned. 71.12 is a number at 18.27 GMT. Remember the man who's essentially mounted the assault at the moment, General Khalifa Haftar. At the moment, the territory he controls is responsible for about 1 million or so barrels of output every single day. Has output been affected at the moment? No, but it's a risk that you simply cannot rule out at this point in time. Here's what's coming up next. What's in, what's not? We'll have the latest from the South African Fashion Week.
The greatest journeys, greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. The Kenya Red Cross has turned to young developers and coders to help improve the way it administers healthcare at the country's massive Kakuma refugee camp. It's teamed up with Google and Oracle to develop and invest in interesting healthcare solutions for the camp. Now, the refugee site was created by the United Nations High Commission for Refugees and the Kenyan government back in 1992. Since then, hundreds of thousands of people have been accommodated there with dwindling medical assistance. CGTN's Hlonela Lupuana now reports.
The Kakuma refugee camp currently houses more than 180,000 people. The refugees come in from countries like Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia, Burundi and the DRC. Most of them have been forcibly displaced due to raging conflict as well as poverty. The Kenya Red Cross says as that number grows, so do the challenges. Chief among them is healthcare administration.
Most of the refugees, as well from where they come from, may have missed to get the right healthcare service, including immunization. In some cases, women and children and even men may have been violated physically, and then they come in and require assistance. Then the living conditions, we're happy that the UNHCR has tried to provide proper housing, but when you look at, of course, the issues of design and the population, then and the environment in general makes it easy for them to get, diseases.
Desperate to improve those health conditions, the Kenya Red Cross, Google and Oracle teamed up for Nairobi's first TechFugees hackathon. Participants had a little over a day to come up with innovative tech solutions that will assist health workers and community leaders on the ground. Isra Yaya Ibrahim left war-torn Darfur in 2007. She and her family have been living at the campsite ever since. She says because the camp is densely populated, some basic services are hard to come by.
You may go to education, but the classes are so congested. A class you may find having 300 students per class. The level of the education it is very limited. Once you reach the high school, it is over. We don't have universities, colleges, we don't have. Even the basic needs is a problem. So, and all the girls in the camp to get employed is a problem also. So we end up having a dropout of the girls from the school. It is high rate because of the basic needs the girls cannot find in the schools.
These young coders and designers created apps ranging from a mobile clinic, a data bank for medical facilities to mitigate poor mobile connectivity. They also devised communication-based apps as the camp houses many nationalities and languages.
We were helping them in terms of, let me call it debugging, so in terms of sorting out any issues with the code. Then also in terms of logic, like now how things are flowing from maybe from a community health worker to a community leader to the systems that are already there to infographics and such and such.
These tech solutions will be applied across all clinics servicing the Kakuma refugee camp as well as surrounding refugee sites. They'll also help members of the hosting community in an effort to promote integration. Shonela Lupuwana, CGTN, Nairobi.
On to Burkina Faso now. Chinese and Burkinabe entrepreneurs have met for a roundtable jointly organized by the Chinese Embassy and the Society General of Burkina Faso. The event aims to push for the economic and social development of the country by supporting a lot more entrepreneurs.
The event focuses on initiating investment opportunities in Burkina Faso. Those interested will be set up in line with the China-led Belt and Road Initiative. It intends to supplement a trilateral cooperation involving state actors, investors, and banking institutions.
The Chinese embassy has an idea of good trilateral cooperation and hopes to be able to find a more efficient, secure, and sustainable financing method from Societe Generale in its efforts to promote the modernization of infrastructure. The Chinese embassy is also considering the renewal of energy structures and the updating of the tertiary service with all the actors involved.
We believe that the state has done its part on the financial market, but we too must provide an innovative solution and invest through the loans we make to companies. We have the expertise. China has a desire for Africa, and we are therefore trying to find a solution to the problems Burkinabe people face.
The Burkinabe government sees the Embassy of the People's Republic of China and Societe Generale as two long-term strategic partners interested in supporting developing countries.
Our expectation, of course, are the consolidation of achievements, but also the acceleration of procedures that are underway. The public is waiting, as it is the government, while remaining true to the commitments it has made with its partners for solutions to be found quickly so that important projects can begin.
As it turns out, the Chinese are very interested in the Burkinabe market and want to invest mainly in infrastructure, energy, and agriculture. Incidentally, we need a business environment that is well secured, beneficial, and efficient enough for Chinese investors to come, invest, and participate in the development of this country.
The resumption of diplomatic relations between China and Burkina Faso has laid a political foundation for bilateral relations. Societe Generale aims to offer financing as more business opportunities are created. Astatal, CGTN.
Now, the South African Fashion Week has wrapped up in Johannesburg. It's now in its 22nd year, and the Fashion Week has become a must-do event in the calendar for those who want to show off their latest creations. But the industry as a whole is changing. Several big global retailers are attempting to ensure that more environmentally sustainable practices are implemented, even at the cost of producing eye-catching garments. CGTN Sumitra Naidu went to see what the local designers are putting forward.
The fashion industry has become one of the largest polluters in the world. The heavy use of pesticides, toxic dyes, and abuse of animal rights has increased the industry's carbon footprint. The multi-billion-dollar industry, though, is slowly adapting to environmentally sustainable practices, more so because consumers are starting to pay attention and question production ethics.
In the last couple of years, we've definitely noticed a shift in the consumer. They're asking more questions, they're more informed.
Fashion houses are now increasingly creating garments using natural fabric and recyclable materials. Ethical fashion was once a niche, but now it's a growing market attracting new skills.
Sustainability in terms of jobs, we're looking at a bunch of people that are now being employed to make incredible clothing. And everybody's proud of what they're manufacturing and proud of what they're putting through. So we do see a great sort of young crowd that's coming through and saying, but we're not interested in making hundreds and thousands of the same thing. They'd rather actually spend their time curating their product, sourcing their fabric really carefully.
It's a huge industry, so it actually has the capacity and the power to make some serious change. And because it's also a visual medium and it has so much influence in the modern world, I think it can also really be a driver for social change and help people to change their minds about how they spend their money.
The move to earth-conscious consumerism is growing, albeit slowly, which is still a major concern as the impact of climate change is being felt more every day. But fashion is a massive industry that can make a major impact on the environment, the way we live, and the way we dress. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
We're staying with South African fashion. The weekend also saw the Fab Bridal Expo. It's the longest standing, most renowned and glamorous bridal show, at least in South Africa, held in Cape Town. Now, the event offers those planning weddings access to everything you need for the special day in one location. Wedding venues, honeymoon destinations, meeting with dress designers, event stationery, you name it, you'll find it. Now, the two-day event also featured wedding gown fashion shows from Cape Town's well-known and upcoming designers. Shopping at the festival saves most couples quite a bit of money, as well as a variety of service providers are under one roof, and they offer some pretty attractive wedding packages.
So I found out about the event on social media, and there's a wedding dress designer who is displaying here who I really wanted to come see and to see her dresses, and I heard that there's going to be a lot of different vendors, so I wanted to come see because it's nice to be able to tangibly see the products instead of looking online. And it's been really helpful. I mean, we got here probably about half an hour ago, but we've already seen so much, and I'm excited for the fashion shows later today.
I'm a wedding gown designer in Cape Town, and what we offer the brides is couture gowns, so we can design from scratch, or they can buy from my collection. So all these dresses that you see here today, the bride can come in and say no, that it's got a strap, we can add a sleeve. So everything is proudly made in Cape Town.
All right, then a quick run through currencies here for you. Not much change as far as currencies are concerned, but for you yield-hungry fund managers, take a look at Kenya on the 10th of April. The government is going to be putting out an interesting bond on the market in two tranches. It's looking to borrow about $500 million US in a 10-year bond and a 20-year bond as well. Granted, yields here are not exactly as high as Nigeria, 14% on that side of the world, but you should expect something in the 12 to 13% range, probably closer to the 12.5, 12.7 range. We'll see what the auction goes like. April the 10th is the relevant date. That's it for tonight's edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen here in the last hour. So, several ways of getting your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. Well, today's up next from Washington.